YouTube channel dedicated to teaching the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Today we're going to follow up on episode 2, the drama of Genesis. Last time we covered the life of Isaac. Isaac's life can be summed up in four words: the birth, the bride, the boys, and the blessing. So last time we left off with the blessing. Isaac brings Jacob in a second time and knowingly blesses him with the promise that he had received from his father Abraham, meaning the nation Israel and the Messiah would come through Jacob's line. So Jacob heads out from his father's household toward Haran, where his mother's family is. Now, this is the first time Jacob has left home. He's getting outside of the confines of his life with his parents. So he heads out. There's no road signs. There's no GPS. He is on his own traveling. So his first night, he comes to a place called Bethel, and there he lays down his head. He's exhausted in many ways, physically, emotionally, and he's on his own. He lays down his head and he falls asleep on a rock. And during his sleep, the Lord appears to Jacob in a dream. In his dream, Jacob sees the gate of heaven open and the Lord standing at the top of the gate, and the angels of God ascending and descending in Jacob's dream. And the Lord speaks to Jacob. He confirms the promise that Isaac had made with Jacob. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make your name great. The offspring, the seed, is going to come through your line. Now, this is Jacob's first encounter with God. When you look forward to the New Testament, you get a little more explanation about Jacob's encounter with God at Bethel. So if you look at the New Testament in the book of John, it's the first chapter, and Jesus is having this conversation with Nathanael. And he says to Nathanael, "You believed in me, even though I just said that I saw you by a fig tree." And Jesus says to Nathanael, "You shall see even greater things. You will see," and this is my translation of the conversation. Jesus is saying to Nathanael, "You will see what Jacob saw at Bethel. You will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." So this encounter that Jacob had was also an encounter with Jehovah Jesus, who would eventually come through the line of Jacob. So Jacob has this amazing dream, and he wakes up and he's just like, "Wow, this place is awesome. This rock is awesome that I slept on. This is like the house of God. The gate of heaven is here." And he decides, "Hey, God, so let's make a deal. What you're promising sounds great. If you take care of me on this journey and you get me to where I'm going and you bring me back, then you will be my God, and I'll also throw in 10% of whatever I make." And that's Jacob's deal that he makes with God. And God doesn't respond to this, but it's very clear in words, in audible words, but it's very clear God takes Jacob up on this. So Jacob's journey continues. He makes it to Haran, and he arrives at a well, and there's some shepherds there. And Jacob talks with the shepherds, and he's like, "Hey, do you know Laban?" And they're like, "Yeah, we do." Um, and Jacob's like, "Is he well?" He's like, "Yeah." And oh, by the way, his daughter Rachel is coming. So uh, Jacob sees Rachel in this moment. So Jacob is struck by how God had guided him through the wilderness to the exact place where Laban was and to Rachel. So he sees Rachel, and Rachel is stunning. And Jacob, this is love at first sight. So Rachel comes up, they have an exchange, and they're kind of waiting. The group is kind of waiting for the rest of the shepherds to show up so they can lift the stone. This is a very large stone, which probably took everybody to lift the stone off the well so that they could draw water and then kind of feed their flocks. Well, Jacob, he's so moved. Um, and you think Jacob is a bit of a wimp when you first meet him because he hangs around with his mom, and he kind of stays around the house. He's very contemplative. Jacob, in this moment, you see how strong, how manly he is. He just picks up this giant stone and removes it. And he's like, uh, you know, Rachel, you don't have to wait. I'm going to remove this stone so you can water your flocks now. So she waters her flocks, and then they go back to to her father's house, which is uh, Jacob's uncle. And Jacob wastes no time. He's like, I want to marry Rachel. He's so moved by the guidance of God on his life, and he's just struck, um, love struck with Rachel. So Laban is very shrewd. So Jacob hasn't been out in the world. Laban sees Jacob's potential. He sees the strength in Jacob. He sees that um, Rachel, without even trying, has already captured his heart. So Laban's like, okay, let's make a deal. And he says, I will give you Rachel. And Laban's a somewhat materialistic individual. He treats his daughter as almost like a commodity. And this is not how Jacob is at all. He's in love. And he knows he wants Rachel. And obviously there was a connection that had developed with these two. And you also see this after the marriage. So Laban sees this, so he's like, okay, if you work for me for 7 years, then you can have Rachel. And Jacob, this is like, doesn't even bat an eye. He's like, yeah, doesn't even negotiate. It's not even a thought in his mind. So then Laban sets the wedding up, and uh, there's the wedding night, and the bride has a veil on, so Jacob can't see who she is. And he wakes up in the morning, and it's Leah, Rachel's sister. And and Jacob is shocked and he's heartbroken. And he comes to Laban like, "How could you do this?" And Laban's kind of like, "Well, you should have read the fine print. In our country, you don't give away the younger daughter before you give away the the older daughter, and it's just kind of a custom. You should have known this." And Jacob is just beside himself. And then Laban's like, "Well, let's make another deal. You can have Rachel too if you work for me another 7 years." So here, Jacob gets tricked by Laban to work for him for 14 years. So Jacob ends up taking 2 wives. And then this, of course, creates all kinds of problems. You see these 2 women, they're married to Jacob. Jacob clearly loves Rachel. Leah knows that Jacob's heart is with Rachel. And you can see how, and Jacob only has one heart, but he has 2 wives. So this creates a whole dynamic within the family. So you see this family strife from the very beginning uh, in Jacob's life. So his family grows, and it's this kind of sordid competition uh, of trying to earn Jacob's affections, and no one wins in this relationship. So 14 years go by, and Jacob's like, okay, Laban, I've put in my time, and Laban and Jacob's like, I got to get away from this guy, and Laban says, well, my flocks and my herds, they have flourished under your care. And so Jacob says, like, okay, well, then you need to pay me a wage. So Laban agrees to a wage for Jacob, and then Laban keeps changing the deal because every time um, the flocks end up growing more and more under Jacob's care. So then eventually Jacob ends up with a huge herd of livestock, and Laban is not going to let Jacob go. And so Jacob's like, I got to get away from my uncle. He's not a good man. So Jacob takes off, and then takes his entire family, escapes his uncle's grasp, and then Laban realizes that Jacob's gone, and he goes after Jacob. And then eventually Laban catches up, and Jacob's like, okay, let's make a deal. Um, let's let there not be a strife among us. Kind of let bygones be bygones, and those 2 part, and Laban goes back. And so then Jacob continues to make his way back to his home. And along the way, um, the anxiety that Jacob has about meeting his brother, he knows he's going to have to confront his brother Esau. And he is absolutely terrified of the thought of meeting Esau, because his last memory of Esau was ready to kill him. Now, several years have passed by. Jacob and Esau have had no contact with each other. And Jacob really decides to come to God. This is another one of his moments where he turns to the Lord. So uh, he sends all of his stuff and his wives and his children across the Jabbok River, and he stays alone on the other side. And the Lord shows up, and Jacob and the Lord literally wrestle all night. Um, if you know anything about, just imagine, he wrestles God all night. This is how the biblical narrative is explained. If you know anything about wrestling, wrestling is an intense sport. So like you have like 2-minute periods, and like a whole match may last 6 minutes or 9 minutes if I think it's in the collegiate space. These matches are really short because you're exhausted, because it requires an entire person. Jacob wrestles with God all night, and he will not let him go. He's like, I will not let you go until you bless me. And God touches his hip and dislocates it from its socket. And Jacob still will not go. He's like, I will not let you go until you bless me. So God blesses Jacob and changes his name, Jacob, which means deceiver, or I like to say, let's make a deal, uh, to a to one who struggles with God, and one who is a blessing. So this is a real turning point for Jacob in this second encounter that he has with God. So then he meets his brother, and his brother's like totally forgot about the whole thing, and he's so happy to see his brother, and um, and the entire family that God has blessed Jacob with. But Jacob is still a bit squeamish about, Esau could change his mind, and he just doesn't want to risk it. So he's like, well, his brother wants to provide him with an armed guard to the place where he was going to settle. And Jacob's like, it's okay, you don't need to do that. And so Esau departs, and then Jacob um, continues to travel, and then God shows up and speaks to Jacob directly, and tells Jacob to um, um, meet with him at Bethel. So this is the place where Jacob had his first encounter with God, and and Jacob builds an altar, and he tells his family, he's like, okay, everybody, we need to put all the idolatry, all the idolatrous practices. We need to consecrate ourselves to the Lord. So Jacob leads his family in consecrating themselves to the Lord. And then the Lord appears to Jacob and again confirms the covenant with Jacob. And Jacob calls this place um, El Bethel, which means the God of Bethel, or God who met me at Bethel and who took care of me through my entire journey. So fast forward to the end of Jacob's life. Jacob, this is in around Genesis 48 and 49. And Jacob is now at the end of his life, and he he blesses Joseph's two children, which are his grandsons. And he tells this story about the Lord, my shepherd, God who took care of me and delivered me out of all my troubles, my self-inflicted troubles brought on me by other people. The Lord has been my shepherd. And this is where we see the emergence of the term. This is the first place we see it in the Bible, is the Lord is my shepherd. And, and Jacob even calls him the angel that delivered me. And then Jacob goes on, and he sets his boys aside, and he's on his deathbed, and he he tells them about the things to come, and he gives very specific promises to each of his 12 sons, and he rouses himself at the bedside. This is like his last act is to worship the Lord. I used to be a hospice nurse, so I've seen many people at the end of life, and people usually have a rally towards the end of life where they rouse themselves and they suddenly become lucid, or they say something very profound. And Jacob has this rally at his deathbed, and the last thing that he does is he gets out of bed and he rouses and he worships God. And that's how he concluded his life as, God, I worship you. I love you. I'm blessing the people that are around me. He starts out as a very selfish man, a very self-centered man, but he concludes his life with being a man of blessing. Um, he, and, he, and there's just a tremendous sense of gratitude. And one of the last prophecies that he gives is actually in Genesis 49:10. I'm going to pull my Bible up real quick because it's very important. And I'm going to read. This is in reference to Judah. So Jacob says, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. So Jacob identifies Judah as the next person who's going to carry the seed, remember the seed of woman in Genesis 3:15. Judah is going to be the carrier of the seed, and the one that comes from Judah's line is going to be a king. And in fact, he's going to be the King of Kings, and the scepter will not depart from him. And to him belongs the obedience of the nations, meaning the one that's going to come from the line of Judah is going to rule the world. He's going to be the worldwide king. And he's going to have the scepter. Now, this is really important because the scepter represents authority. So when you go back to Genesis chapter 3, Adam lost the scepter. He lost the authority. He gave it up in quiet disobedience. And the fall ensues, and then all the drama that you see unfolds from that place when man gives up his authority and he comes in league with the serpent. And what Jacob is saying here, this is in Genesis 49, verse 10, and this is the second to last chapter in the book, is that one is coming from the line of Judah who will restore man to his rightful place, will put the serpent in his place, and reconcile God back to man. This is how much Jacob has changed. You see him thinking about God. You see him thinking about the future. You see him thinking about nations. His heart has been changed, and he becomes a purveyor and of God's blessing and sowing and foretelling this this of this redemption, this global redemption through the individual who is going to come. This is unbelievable. This man is so changed. So that's Jacob's life. So Jacob's life is a great place to stop and kind of talk about the rest of the book. So Genesis, first of all, is a book about Israel. And you see that God has called Israel from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, and then the nation grows into 12 tribes. And the book of Genesis is also about the seed. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, and you see the development of the promises and the prophecies around the seed. The seed is going to be the seed of woman, meaning supernaturally conceived. The seed is going to be the blessing from Abraham to all nations. The seed is going to come from the union between Abraham and Sarah, which produces Isaac. And then finally, we see the seed is the king that's going to come and restore all things. So Genesis is a story about Israel, the Genesis of Israel. It's also a story about the seed that God is bringing forth. It's also a personal message because Abraham, as the father of faith, is the example of righteousness that can be obtained by faith for both Jew and non-Jew, for Jew and Gentile, circumcised and uncircumcised. It's the individual that recognizes God is their creator. God is the moral authority in the universe. God is the Savior, and God is also the judge that each person will have to appear before and give an account. And also, God is sovereign in determining when we're born, the family, the geography, the language, the culture. God has created us for this moment, and He has a plan for us in this time. So God is overall ruling and reigning, orchestrating everything, ultimately to bring us to the place where we receive Him, we believe in Him. Um, it's like in Genesis, God is saying, "Do you hear my voice? I stand at the door and I knock. Will you open the door? Will you receive me? Will you believe in my Son's name? And then become a child of God. Come under my supernatural care because I have great and precious promises and I want to lead you to a supernatural destiny." And that's really Genesis in a nutshell. So next time we'll pick up with the life of Joseph and we'll learn much more about the supernatural destiny. And then that will be the last clip for Genesis. Thank you and have a great day.